How to construct a fence using the Kiwitech Vehicle PAC and posts. Please follow our other videos on assembling the PAC and assembling the Kiwitech tread-in posts. When you're ready to start fencing, taking the gearbox, using the large hole in the centre of the upstand, this is where the vehicle chassis slots into for when you're in fence construction mode. Before slotting the spools onto the chuck, ensure the chuck has been loosened. The first spool, whether you're using 1, 2 or 3 wires, should slide onto the chuck and contact the white ring. When using a 2 or 3 wire pack, a little more care is required to ensure the correct engagement on spool 2 and 3. All Kiwitech spools have a middle seam. This seam should engage on the raised ridge of each chuck. It is possible to push the spools past the chuck ridge. When all spools have been fed onto the chuck, check the second and third spools run freely. If they do not run freely, they've been pushed past the chuck ridge. Between each spool, there should be a small gap of about 12 mm. When tightening a 2 or 3 wire chuck, one jaw may expand a bit more than the other. To rectify this, after tightening the chuck up a little bit, place a hand on top of the spools and give them a little sideways movement. This action will wake up the chuck and result in even more jaw expansion. You can then continue to adjust the tightness of the chuck as required. When adjusting a chuck for fence construction, it is important to not over-tighten the chuck. If the chuck is too tight when putting out the polywire, the spools will have difficulty rotating around the chuck. This results in a lot of frictional heat and the chuck melting and needing to be replaced quicker. A chuck will only melt if it has been over-tightened.
We arrive where we want to place the fence and we face away from our starting hedge or fence line with the bike pointing in the direction we want to face. We remove the rack from the rear of the bike and clip it on to the vehicle pack itself. In this example, we're going to use a Kiwitech 3-wire end assembly to start our fence. This allows us to use the release hook function to remotely release the polywires from the other end of the fence. You'll see this in part 2. So we stamp in our strainer post, leaning slightly backwards away from the fence, and then using the width of our hand, we line up our strut post and we push this in the ground just slightly offset from the line of the fence. These two easily clip together to form a strong end assembly. We move our 3-wire vehicle kit into our fencing position by twisting it, and we take the 3 wires from the spools through the wire guides. The top wire just goes to the first guide, middle wire through the first and second guide, and the bottom wire through first and second guides as well. We carry these towards our fence, towards our end assembly post, remembering in which order we hold the wires. We're going to wire up the bottom wire first, and because we're using a Kiwitech end assembly, we're going to wire up the release hook so we can release this polywire from the far end of the fence when it's time to remove the fence. Alternatively, we could have simply used insulated handles or some string to start our fence. The Kiwitech release hooks are marked with numbers which indicate the order to wrap, but we go around, back through the middle, around the top, and through the middle again. The length of our tail determines how many triggers it's going to take to release the fence. Moving back to the bike, we make sure that that secondary guide is facing upwards, and we move the pack to the side. It's good practice to place a tread-in or post 1 or 2 meters from the start of your fence. This ensures the wire starts at the correct height and also is a useful guide when operating the release hooks. We're going to select low range in the bike or a low gear and sit safely astride the bike. We start slowly, keeping an eye on the spools to make sure they're turning freely. If needed, we can adjust the tension on the chuck. To fence off the bike, we need to master the technique of clipping the wires onto the post. And when treading the post in the ground, we would use the heel of our boot rather than the toe. Using our heel gives us a heavier weight and reduces the risk of injury. So we travel to the next position of our next post. We go under and out, and then we turn to 3 o'clock, back to 12, and we hook the wires on. Now, this technique takes a little bit of practice, but once mastered, really speeds up the art or task of fence erection. You can see how we pull a thread in from the rack, we hold the very top, we take it around and behind the wire, push it out to 3 o'clock, hook the wires, and then back to 12 to secure the wires and the clips, and we stamp it in with the heel of the boot. We're roughly allowing 10 to 14 metres between posts. This field's very flat. If the field's very undulating, we need to put a post in every time there's a change in contour, or certainly a change in direction. The rack holds 30 posts, and that should be enough to erect easily a 300 to 400 metre. If fencing on steep ground, it's possible to remove the pack from the bike and to carry it manually, or to park the bike at the top of the hill and to use it to decant the poly wire as you walk down over with the posts. So we get towards the hedge where we're going to terminate our fence, we stop about 5 metres away. Turn off the bike, put the brake on, and at this end of the fence we're going to again use a Kiwitech end assembly post to finish our fence. So we just have to remove that from the pack. So we walk towards the fence and mark where we want to position it. Lean our strainer post slightly away from the direction of the fence. Stamp it in firmly with the heel of our boot. Line up the strut post, should be about 8 inches past the strainer post and slightly offset from the line of the fence. Bring the two together and clip them in place. With the 3-wire vehicle pack, the spool that is closest towards you, closest to the chuck nut, which we're just loosening now, that's the bottom spool. So we loosen the chuck nut, that reduces the tension on the chuck and allows us to easily remove the spool. We bring the spool over to the end assembly post, we just check the wire tension between our hands and we clip on to our release hook through the holes in the spool. Repeat this for middle and top wire. You don't need to over tension the fence, just enough so the wire is taut between the posts. Once assembled, you have a very strong but very flexible fence that will easily resist animal impact.